Sonic 2 speedrunning has a big problem. A timer problem. In most speed games, you can just start your own timer upon starting the game and stop the timer when you beat the game. This is known as real-time attack, or RTA for short. Sonic 2 speedruns, on the other hand, were different, preferring to use the in-game timer, where the sum of every level's clear time added up to your final time. In-game time was the standard, as it ended up being a much more accurate measurement for how fast your speedrun was compared to RTA. The only downside in terms of accuracy was that if you paused the game, so did the in-game time. But this is a speedrun of Sonic out of all games. You gotta go fast, and there's just no need to pause. Okay, maybe except for this one level wrap glitch, but that's the exception, not the rule. Right? Before I get into this whole pausing fiasco, we need to first bring up why Sonic 2 speedrunners used in-game time over RTA. Time bonuses. The faster you beat a stage based on the in-game timer, the greater the time bonus is. The real kicker, however, is that when this, along with the ring bonus, scroll down to 0 as it's added to your score. This is done at a constant rate, meaning if you get a higher time bonus, you spend more time waiting for the next level than if you were to reach the goal just slow enough for a smaller time bonus. This means that it's possible to save time in RTA by purposely slowing down. Not only that, but if you earn a combined 10,000 points from time and ring bonuses, you lose an additional 2 seconds from earning a continue. Since many of these levels are beaten within 44 in-game seconds, this happens constantly. This is pretty counterintuitive to the spirit of speedrunning, so sticking to in-game time made the most logical sense. That is, of course, until runners began to abuse pause buffering. Now, why is pausing advantageous for Sonic speedrunning? Well, pause buffering is already a technique used in many speedruns to nail very precise tricks, especially useful for frame-perfect tricks when applicable. Sonic 2 is one of those games, and as far back as 2006, some of the first big skips in the run where pausing was somewhat useful were found. Namely, two specific glitches: the Hilltop Act 1 lava zip, found by Rolkin in 2006, and the Metropolis Zone Act 2 level wrap found by Joe Stansky in 2009. Both of these skips involve buffering directional presses in order to get the zips, where if you pause the game and then hold or let go of a direction and then unpause, that directional change will be registered immediately. As a result, pause buffering helps immensely with executing zips. While jump inputs cannot be buffered, pausing can still help time jumps if needed. However, since pausing stops the in-game time, the moderators at Speed Demos Archive, which was the primary website for submitting record times back then, ruled that any pause that exceeded 60 frames would be frame counted, and an additional second would be added to the final time as a penalty for every 60 frames spent paused. While some old-school runners, like SegaJunkie, would use pause buffering to consistently nail the Metropolis 2 zip, he never paused long enough for the rule to ever be enforced. Many people didn't even know this rule on SDA even existed because of how it was never really enforced, and not everyone pause buffered. Although many big skips, like the previously mentioned Hilltop 1 and Metropolis 2 zips, could be slightly easier with pause buffering, most people who perform these tricks didn't feel the need to pause for the most part. But in 2011, this would suddenly change. On October 26, 2011, Glitchman would post in the Sonic 2 forum on TAS videos that he had discovered a level wrap in Metropolis Zone Act 3, a zip that skipped straight from the start of the level straight to the boss, and saved over 50 seconds. The first time this trick would be implemented in a world record was SegaJunkie 1613, set on March 28, 2012. However, this trick was far more precise than any trick used in full game runs so far. This was the first trick that basically required pause buffering if you wanted to nail it consistently. For this trick to work, you need to position Sonic so that he's teetering on the left edge of this platform, which will fall once Sonic or Tails jumps or walks off of it. Pause buffering helps position Sonic correctly, so that when Tails walks off and the platform begins to fall, Sonic will be inside the wall. While Sonic is falling with the platform, you have a few frames to press right, which most people pause buffer. Finally, runners will pause just as Sonic passes the top of the slope to buffer releasing right, which when performed correctly will result in a complete stage wrap. The implementation of the Metropolis 3 level wrap would be the first time pause buffering would become widely used in Sonic 2 speedruns, but it would be the only trick to take advantage of pausing due to its difficulty, at least for a while. A long while. During the time period from 2011 to 2020, there would be a decent amount of new time saves found, some of which would be implemented into runs, such as the Wing Fortress boss quick kill found by Aglar in 2012, and first implemented in Timp Z's 1608 PB in October 2013. However, many of the skips Aglar found around this time were far too difficult to go for in runs. These included a level wrap in Casino Night Act 1, and zips in Aquatic Ruin Acts 1 and 2, Hilltop Acts 1 and 2, and a wall zip in Metropolis Act 1. For several years, these tricks were considered TAS only, as was the case with Zugriff's discovery of a level wrap in Casino Night Act 2. Both of the level wraps in both acts of Casino Night are particularly precise. Similar to the Metropolis 3 wrap, both Casino Night wraps involve clipping Sonic out of bounds by having him teeter off the edge of a moving platform. However, these zips relied on precise inputs during the zip, as well as having Sonic be in the correct sub-pixel positions to work. While the Casino Night 1 level wrap had been performed in some individual runs of the stage, the Casino Night 2 wrap and the Aquatic Ruin 2 zip were thought to be straight up impossible for a human. Even a relatively easier looking trick, like the Chemical Plant 1 level wrap discovered by TNT in 2013, was not worth using for full game runs, due to its ridiculous difficulty and precision relative to how little in-game time it saves. These tricks were not viable for full game runs. This attitude persisted for a very long time. Of course, a very long time is not forever, and eventually, all of these tricks that were thought to be TAS only would be used in world record runs, with the use of, you guessed it, pausing. It first started in 2020, when new tricks such as the extended lava zip in Hilltop Act 1 began to see use, as well as pause buffered setups for the monitor zip in Hilltop 2 and Metropolis Act 1 screen wrap, both found by Summer Haze and Joey Baby 69. In addition, runners were now pausing much more frequently in order to consistently nail tight jumps from a spin dash, as well as making already established tricks like the Wing Fortress glitch boss kill much more consistent. There was no penalty, as these pauses were very brief. A run, however, would be invalidated if a pause exceeded 20 seconds, but this was just to make sure runners wouldn't abuse pausing to take an unnecessary break mid-run. Thankfully, this rule rarely needed to be enforced. However, the floodgates for pausing were now wide open, and a revolution was about to take place. One that would change the game forever. On March 18th, 2021, a segmented speedrun of Sonic 2 would be uploaded to YouTube, splicing together the best segments performed by 5 runners, including Shore, Eandis, Daniel Hall, and Egotistical. This segmented run included all of the fastest tricks a human could possibly perform, no matter if they were currently too difficult to include in full game runs. The final in-game time was a stunning 12:40, over a minute faster than the current single segment record. This would be a massive turning point in the community, as this segmented run included a trick that was really thought to be TAS only in every sense of the word. The TAS zip in Hilltop Act 1. This zip saves 5 seconds over the extended zip Joey found the year earlier, but is much harder, requiring you to release a frame-perfect spin dash for the zip, then start holding left within one of 3 frames, and then you have to frame-perfectly release left, but that frame depends on which of the 3 frames you started holding left, and depending on the situation, you may have to time a jump to get over the ceiling within a 2-frame window. Needless to say, this was very impressive, and absolutely required pause buffering if you wanted to perform the TAS zip somewhat consistently. These dynamic setups also applied to other TAS-only tricks that would soon find their way in the run. This TAS revolution was made possible thanks to speedrunner Summer Hayes, Hachi, Shore, Zaxxon, Daniel Hall, JoeyBaby69, Eandis, and of course, pausing. These runners were able to come up with viable setups for tricks thanks to pause buffering. What was previously reserved for only one trick in the run was now about to become a staple for Sonic 2 speedrunning. For the Casino Night 1 and 2 level wraps, the Chemical Plant 1 level wrap, as well as smaller zips in Aquatic Ruin Act 2 and Chemical Plant Act 2. Pause buffering and the TAS revolution eventually led to Eandis bringing the record below 13 minutes on November 11th, 2022. The final in-game minute barrier that will ever be broken. Over the next year, the pausing meta would continue to advance. However, a big discrepancy was becoming apparent. In the past, the in-game time and RTA would correlate pretty well. The lower your in-game time, the lower your RTA would be. But as people continue to implement more pause buffers for these tricks, that would no longer be the case. While big level wraps, even when buffered, save both in-game time and real time, while on the other hand, buffering smaller zips primarily saved in-game time, but not necessarily real time. As such, top times on the leaderboard, which is primarily sorted by in-game time, fluctuated wildly on the RTA side. Here on the leaderboard, we can see that while Eandis has world record, he is 29 seconds slower RTA than Joey in second place. In addition, we see Mr. Escatit in third place with the slowest RTA within the top 13. It's actually quite silly looking at it, and members of the classic Sonic speedrunning community realize that ever since the TAS revolution, in-game time was no longer the most accurate timing method for the leaderboard. Pausing was too strong. There was basically no penalty for doing so, and it was abused in nearly every zone of the run. From the difficult screen wraps and zips, to just some really tight jumps. Something had to change. On April 14th, 2024, the Sonic 2 community opened up a poll regarding the timing method. There were two options: keep in-game time as the primary timing method, or switch to using RTA minus TBC. The latter option is real-time attack, but with the time bonus countdown and continues removed from the final time. Now, RTA minus TBC was not a foreign concept to classic Sonic speedrunning. It has its roots in Sonic 3 and Knuckles as its primary timing method since 2016, as that game has much more issues with in-game time than Sonic 2 did, such as the in-game time pausing after a boss is defeated, and skipping cutscenes by resetting the game after the end of Act 2 of a zone. This was also not the first time that discussions or votes for RTA minus TBC were held for Sonic 2. In early 2019, after a new level wrap was discovered for Labyrinth Zone Act 3 in Sonic 1, a very precise and difficult trick that required lots of pause bufferings, discussions were held on whether Sonic 1 and 2 should change timing methods. When a vote was held a month later, RTA minus time bonuses had more votes than the other two options. But with less than 50% of the total vote, moderators were unconvinced that timing needed to change. And so, the status quo persisted for another 5 years. This time, with strictly two options, no indifferent option, RTA minus TBC would require a supermajority of at least 70% of the vote in order for it to become the new standard. The poll lasted 72 hours, and in the end, RTA minus TBC won, a huge nerf to pausing. As a result, many positions on the leaderboard would shift around. Eandis was no longer the world record holder, swapping places with Joey. Many runners who abused pausing more for a lower in-game time fell a few positions, while those that paused less rose up in the ranks. Even so, it wouldn't take long for runners to adapt quickly, as just 3 days after the timing change, Eandis would reclaim the record from Joey, and both runners are still trying to lower the record, as everyone competes on a somewhat clean slate. Mr. Escatit, who fell from 3rd place all the way down to 13th from the timing change, quickly adjusted to the new meta, bouncing back to 4th place. The shift away from in-game time poses an interesting change in the Sonic 2 speedrunning meta, And there is now an interesting risk-reward scenario with pausing. You obviously want to go for the biggest time saves with pausing if you want a top time, but you also have to be mindful to minimize pauses, either by pausing in shorter bursts, or less often in general. Perhaps you don't go for that tight jump or that one zip that only saves a few seconds. Or you go for it, because you're confident in pausing less, or doing it unbuffered. Either way, the world of Sonic 2 speedrunning is looking more exciting than ever, and I hope you found this whole pausing dilemma as interesting as I did. Who knows? Maybe Sonic 1 will go through a similar timing change, but no pressure, no pressure. Thank you all so much for watching, and remember to shoot for the moon.